next section is Regulated and Resilient, Adapting GxP Operations for Modern Compliance. This session brings together leaders from IT, OT, and quality to explore how connected data and digital tools are transforming compliance in regulated environments. Joining us are Sarath, Vice President of Operational Technology at Smith & Nephew, John, who is Chief Product Officer at HighByte, and then Colleen, who is Life Sciences Enterprise Sales Lead at Tulip. Please join me in welcoming the team.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to take a few minutes to talk you through these topics and save some time at the end for questions. So we do want it to be interactive. So to that point, I'm actually going to start with a quick raise of hands, and about all we can see are your hands. So because those are really
yeah, you really can't see faces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
So by call of hands, raise your hand if you are IT, please. Okay, couple, 5, 6, under 10. OT, raise your hand. Okay, we got double that. Quality.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh,
Awesome. Okay. Don't know how to spell either and have a completely different functional job. Okay, a few of those. Does anyone want to shout out what you are just so we can keep your perspective and your day-to-day in mind? Operations, okay. Operations, cool. Okay, anyone else? All right, good. So hopefully that'll help us frame our answers and know how technical. This can be a topic that can, kind of run it at the high level, or it can kind of get really deep, and we want you to help us stay to the middle, and if you want to go deeper, we can do that afterwards in the Q&A session. So cool. With that, I know Jen just introduced both of you, but I'd love for you both to give an introduction of yourselves, your organization, and particularly why you were interested in joining this panel.
All right. So I'm the Vice President for Operational Technology at Smith & Nephew. I've been at Smith & Nephew a little over 6 years now. We're a medical device manufacturer with a presence in orthopedics, sports medicine, and advanced wound care. This is actually my first gig in operations. For about 25 years before that, I've led R&D teams, mostly in med device, generally to do with robotics and sensing, and a brief stint at Amazon doing advanced robotic grasping. There's some Amazon robotics people here too, so I'm going to have to bounce into them.
Awesome.
And why am I here?
Make sure that happens.
One of the coolest things I think about this conference, so I've been here the 3 years they've had it, and I find it quite comforting because all of the stuff that we're deeply worried that we're far behind on or don't know how to do, I talk to other people and they're sort of far behind on the same stuff or are good at certain things and not good at things that we're good at. So it to me, just chatting with people and understanding their journey, and I think particularly over the past, from last year forward, there's been a lot of opportunity to talk to fellow colleagues in the med tech industry, and I think we have particularly odd requirements sometimes, and it's great to be able to talk through how people deal with those.
John?
John Harrington, Chief Product Officer and co-founder of HighByte. I've spent my entire career in and around manufacturing companies and technology, and love talking with customers and prospects or companies in general about how we can use data and use technology to improve their lives, to improve the processes, and to improve the business. So coming to an event like this is tremendous because we get to talk with a lot of customers, a lot of prospects, a lot of individuals, understand what's going on, hear what other partners. HighByte is a partner of Tulip's, and kind of hear what's going on and how we can work together and how we can drive efficiencies in manufacturing. For us at this specific panel discussion, it's powerful because, like I said, we're partnered with Tulip, and Smith & Nephew is a customer of ours. So it's great to be on stage. It's great to talk with Sarath. Did I get it right? I got it wrong.
Good enough.
Sarath, and it's great to have this conversation. I guess the only other thing I would say is that life sciences is our single biggest industry vertical, and so this whole topic around GxP, around quality, around data resilience, is just very near and dear to what we're doing. So, looking forward to it.
Awesome, awesome, cool. You brought up the word resilience, which obviously is in our title too, but I think before we start we should actually define what resilience means, because I think it can mean different things to different people. So I'd love to ask you both first to share with everybody how you define resilience.
So I think for this talk, it speaks to data, and I will defer to the expert here, because before even getting to that, as most of you know, the most complicated part of the stuff that we do is the human element, and getting people to understand change, particularly across the persnicketies of the different departments that are involved and their own interests, right? So I think about resilience from a people perspective. I think about it sort of in a parallel way, right? One of my favorite terms is anti-fragile. I don't know if any of you have heard that one. It's from Lukianoff and Haight's book, The Coddling of the American Mind. And I tell the story a lot, mostly to my kids. But I find it applies at work too, which is there are some things in life that are fragile, right? Like a china cup, you drop it, it breaks, right? There are some things in life that are not fragile, like a rock. You drop it, nothing's going to happen to it. And then there are things that are anti-fragile, which in order for them to grow, they need to break a little bit. And people are very anti-fragile, right? Another example is there are fruit trees, right? Where the way for that fruit to propagate is that it gets eaten, and then an animal poops out the seeds, and it takes out the coating, and they're now sitting in fertilizer, and the thing can grow, right? Which is frequently how our team can feel after So while I think the data resilience is critical, and I'll talk about kind of how we got affected by that, I think going into it first is thinking about person resilience and thinking about and more than person resilience, all the things you build, understanding that they will fail, and you need to be thinking about how they can fail and become stronger once they do.
I'm going to take a different approach. I'll take the data approach. But I think,
thank goodness.
Interestingly, in our industry, a lot of people say resilient, we need resilient systems, and they immediately think redundancy. I actually think that resiliency comes with being able to see what's happening and being able to measure what's happening. And so if you can see it and you can measure it, then you can determine that there's a problem. We have to almost assume that there will be problems, and we have to assume that there will be change. And so I think resiliency is having solutions and approaches in teams that accept that and move forward with that and drive, and are able to see what's happening both within, for us, it's the transformation of data. For the operator, it's seeing the panel and seeing the metrics that they need to make sure that they're doing well or not. And it's that observability and then agility to respond to it, because we can no longer just assume that everything's going to be perfect. Life is just changing, and factories are changing too quickly now.
Yeah, that's true. You both talked about the human impact, even though we're talking about the role that data plays as well. What role does the convergence of IT, OT, and quality play in being able to get to a level of sophistication that you can start to call yourselves somewhat resilient?
I think it was entirely, if I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I think it's entirely the source of our resilience now. We started, or at least when I started, I learned very quickly that IT-OT convergence thing and how we're supposed to be arguing with IT or something like that, and came to understand a little bit about kind of the roles and responsibilities and how in the end, mostly it didn't matter. We were trying to do the same things, and it was just getting to a point of being able to have that communication. And most of you have heard that story before, because this has been a problem for rather a while, right? And when we finally had kind of an IT partner that we could really talk to and talk about what we were trying to do, and got really less focused on RACIs. I can't stand RACIs. They tend to encourage people to grab turf instead of just saying, look, if we want to put something on the floor and I don't want to do it, it probably isn't going to go there. And if IT doesn't want to do it, it probably ain't going to go there. So that actually helped us think a lot more about what we wanted to build. But quite honestly, that was maybe a third of it. The other 2/3 that really catalyzed, I think, are throughout Smith and Nephew being able to drop technology on the floor was getting quality involved. And it was understanding that if quality doesn't want to do something, it's not going to get out there either. That the quality folks are just as interested in efficiency and technology, maybe for slightly different vectors. But that triumvirate, that three-legged stool, has been tremendous for us. Once we realized that those are really the three organizations that within the factory have a controlling interest in the technology, ops, quality, IT. When we speak as one body, people will pay attention to that, right? So dragging quality in, I think, was probably the best thing that ever happened to us, and don't write that down.
Follow up on that. One, we did note that you said dragging them in, so you might want to comment on that. Do you want to?
Yeah, unfair, right? As I said, I think quality has a really significant interest in technology. They have, at the same time as is appropriate for our industry anyway, a sense of caution and a sense of wanting resilience, right? And actually, from a technology perspective, we kind of want to do this too. Engineers in med tech have already learned that we're not Wild West, right? Med tech is, I think, much more about craftsmanship in engineering than just invention. So it was less about dragging quality in, more about understanding where they wanted the technological value, what was in it for them. And actually, to be quite honest, I say a lot of times, quality can sometimes be better friends to me than my own operations organization, right? Because they're really pushing for outcomes for our patients and customers, and think about that all the time. And that gives us a lot of strength in our being able to advocate for what we want to do.
Awesome, awesome. John, you said you work with the largest number of your customers are life sciences, so you've got a lot of experience across that too. Any practical tips for helping convene this three-legged stool for anyone out there who does not feel like they are sitting on a flat stool today?
I agree that we need to bring them together and that it can't be competing. It's got to be collaborative. We often find that if we put together a project with a customer and it doesn't include all three, at some point in time the other one will come in, the other one will stop it. And so you might as well just accept that and get them all together at the beginning, and kind of go at this and figure out how to work together from the start, and then it moves much faster. I also think you have to find the value in each one. To us, IT is using tools that are so scalable and so broadly, they think enterprise generally, whereas OT thinks site and quality thinks product. And, recognizing that there's value in each one of those, and so we need to all work together. And instead of how can one restrict the other, how can one actually enable things to move faster is where the power is.
Good. Speed and change in regulated industries are often on the other side of the coin, very far from each other. So you both defined you gave examples of what it looks like when you do have that collaboration. Let's maybe look at it from the other side now when you don't. Let's talk about what happens when data is broken. If you could share some examples of when you don't have the context that you need. We've talked about, when we were prepping for this, we talked a little bit about hidden factories and not being able to make decisions, and we've talked a little bit about what it means to just move data, but I thought maybe you could both share a little bit of personal experience and experiences from the industry about some of the problems if you don't start to look at data standardization and unification and context, good context for your data.
I think things don't scale if you don't start with a standardization approach. The volume of data that we have is truly massive. It's not uncommon to go into a factory that has hundreds of PLCs. Each one can have hundreds of thousands of data points. You could collect that data if you really wanted to at 1 millisecond. And if you do the math, it's just vast quantities. So we have to get much more specific. We can't just say, let's just grab all the data and we're done. We have to get much more specific about it. And we need to identify why are we collecting data, where are we moving it to, how are we going to work with that, and bring together the teams to do that. And we also have to recognize that what was put in place to run a piece of machinery by a vendor that we bought that machinery from may be part of the story, but we have a lot more data across our IT systems, our MES systems, our operator systems, our ERP systems and whatnot that all add context. Context comes from information in other systems in many cases. So if we're going to pull all that together, and many of our customers are moving vast quantities of data, say up into the cloud to a data lake, you really need to add context to it, or else you end up with people making bad decisions on data that they didn't fully understand. They didn't know what it was. So context is just so critical today because the vast quantities of potential. But also, if you can do that, the value just is immense.
Yeah. Before we move on from that, do you want to double click on data lake, because there's so many different synonymous names, non-synonymous names, alternatives? Do you want to double click on that idea of moving data and storing data and swimming in lakes?
Lakes, warehouses, lake houses. You could go on and
We
on.
have puddles.
Lots of puddles. Hopefully, and so what we say is, hopefully, it's not a data swamp or a mud puddle. It's more clarity. But yeah, there's lots of options. The key is putting data in a place where you can, where we actually tell people, don't start with the lake. The lake is not a destination. The destination is whether it's a Tulip screen or a dashboard or a data set for a data scientist to work with. That's the end destination. And then work your way back. Is it an operator on the plant floor? Is it a data scientist? What data do they need? What's the tool set they're using, and work your way back instead of focusing on any tool or any specific approach. But data lakes are just highly scalable data storage devices. They actually are generally files that are stored and organized in a way that you can get access and broadly across the enterprise. It allows you to run queries that were never able to be run 10 or 20 years ago. You may have a more technical definition.
More technical definition. No, I think we're still at the data puddle stage. We actually probably want to keep a little bit of a data puddle stage. I think that there's always a question of what do you keep kind of close by, on-prem and in cloud, and yes, where do you make those trade-offs as well, right? The only things I wanted to touch on based on some of the stuff you said was, you're right, the different orientations of the quality and IT and OT groups and their focuses mean that we think about data in different ways. And so, as you said, OT is thinking about the product and IT is thinking about the enterprise. And we're thinking on the operational side, not just about the factory, but the process, right? We're the experts in how is that happening and how do we make it more efficient and how do we make it valuable squeeze value out of it as much as we possibly can for the shareholders, right? So we frequently have to represent that knowledge. At the same time, because we know there's value there, we frequently are we're the ones who want all the data, right? Like, we'll take everything, right? That would be great. Who cares about where we're going to store it? That's IT's problem, right? And I think one of our big learnings that we've gotten from working with quality and IT very closely is where originally you said, you need to understand why you use the data. The way I talk about it with my team is there's data, there's information, and there's action. And in the early days, we started with data and tried to work our way up, which was completely and totally the wrong thing to do. We should have spoken with our customers, understood action. What are the sorts of actions that need to be taken? Devolve from that what sorts of information are required, and then devolve from that what data actually provides that information, and be very targeted about how we do that.
Do you want to follow up on that and share how being intentional about that has helped your patients?
Ooh, patience is a tough one. I think it's early days yet for that, right? So I think, I encountered this a little bit even before Smith and Nephew. There's because on the R&D side, you tend to think about it more, right? The real magic, I think, right now our challenge is within the factory or end to end within the supply chain, right? So step one maybe is value stream. Can we get connectivity and insights there, right? Using with the tactical, quality engineer and engineering supervisor and operator and all those folks. The next is factory, right? In the context of the IT, localized IT for the factory. Next is end to end on the supply chain side, and frequently we kind of stop thinking roughly around there. But I do agree. From the R&D side, that the real magic moment will be when we can take data from how our products perform out in the field, look at what went into the manufacturing of those products that created that outcome or created that issue, and then and not just fix it at the operational side, but heaven forbid, take that and use it to create knowledge to make the next best product on the R&D side,
Yep.
right? So I don't think we're there yet. Particularly for sort of the more complex med devices, but that's the goal.
Yeah, I think that's something we've all been kicking around for years, the digital thread that connects all the way through. And we're not quite there. I think we're still building that, despite the fact that we talk about digital threads all the time. All the time. How does how do the regulations that we all face in this industry impact how you approached your data puddles or your level of sophistication of data, the context around which data is delivered to your operators or to other constituents?
In the early days, when we really didn't want to get in trouble, and we kind of looked at GMP-related data as a third rail that we should stay away from, and so we looked at the world in a very binary way, right? There's operational data and GMP data, and don't go over there, guys, right? As we began really getting into more detailed collaborations, and I think working backwards from action into information into data, it helped us to understand from quality. Actually, one good example is how we developed a verification and validation strategy for Tulip apps across our enterprise, right? So, we were thinking about it one way as development engineers, and quality, who I think gets a bad rap for being extremely conservative about this stuff, but actually for the modern world of software development, I think quality is doing a really good job segregating risk and deciding, where do you have risk, where is something sort of more of a verification activity versus a validation activity, and that was not a conversation initially that we expected to have. We knew how to do both of those things, and we were just kind of going down the more conservative path, right? And IT, I think, similarly thinks that way, right? Though they're thinking more about data security. So it helped us figure out, all right, when for the data integrity problem, the issue is not necessarily, are you collecting everything, but how do you make sure you're not missing anything? If something goes wrong, how do you make sure that the operation can continue, but more importantly, we still know precisely what we needed to know about that product, particularly if you're going to do something like a parametric release, where you need to have real data about what happened in the process all the time, right? Or our continuous manufacturing lines where we're making bandages at super high speed, and you really need to be gathering that in near real time. You might not use it in near real time for quality purposes, but you want to be able to assure the quality organization that nothing's going to get lost, and that's actually part of why HiBite is pretty important to us.
You also talked before about what should stay on-prem, what goes to the cloud, what goes to the lake house, what goes to the lake, et cetera. How have you tackled some of those decisions as the industry is still getting up to speed and comfortable with some cloud technologies?
There's not a good answer to that. There is a good answer to that. I'm not going to give it to you because our answer stinks, which is we do what we can afford to do at the moment and leverage the existence of enterprise level initiatives with IT to try to figure out how we can grow up, right? We know that that won't scale, and so I think like a lot of folks here, this is one of the things that makes me comfortable, right, or makes me feel less awful, is we're transitioning now from being able to deploy apps factory by factory or value stream by value stream in targeted areas to now having caught fire enough that there's enterprise level initiatives that really will force, I think, thinking about how to segregate data appropriately from end to end across the chain. So in our early days, I think up until now, it's a little bit of a luxury. Now I think we're just about at the tipping point where it's something that we need to be thinking about more concretely. And you might know more about that than I do, frankly.
I think that the cloud technologies provide a huge opportunity for companies, but you still have to be deliberate in what you're doing. You still have to have a reason for what you're doing. One thing that's interesting that sometimes we'll have conversation with our customers about is 20 years ago, there were performance and scale problems before the cloud, performance and scale problems on-prem. But compute was generally, you would just buy compute and then you would use it, and if you used too much, it would just slow down. But it was a fixed cost. And now, when you're moving data into the cloud, compute is actually what you generally pay for. You used to pay for storage. Now you're paying generally for compute. So it's much more practical if you curate your data as it's moving before it lands, because that way it's ready to be used. It's ready, it lands in the Tulip tables ready to be considered, so that it matches immediately instead of being these massive data lakes of stuff that you have to run tons and tons and tons of transforms on. So I think that as you're thinking about data lakes and as you're thinking about technologies, at least having a view for what's changed. And just because we did it one way 10 years ago or on-prem doesn't mean that we should do it the same way. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, because actually the cloud provides this massive scale, which is tremendous, and the ability to analyze data across multiple different domains and sites and everything else. But be very deliberate about how you're using it or why you're putting it there and what it is. Is it product related? Is it process related? Is it asset related? And be specific, because that's going to help you a lot in the future. Trying to stitch together data from many different assets based on time stamp is very hard. But if you put it in there for the purpose, then it all is very easy.
Now, everybody in the room who knows me knows I'm not super technical, so I'm going to follow up a question with that. Is that inherently or is that not inherently a difference between data silos, right? So what you just talked about is a problem when you're not intentional around providing contextualized data to the person who needs it at that moment. But that's very different from data silos. So can you spend a few minutes talking about how organizations can start a journey like this as opposed to kind of looking at the problems from the level that we're talking about right now? Can you give some practical advice?
I think the challenge is every new solution that you bring in tends to be another silo. In fact, we often hear from people that they're going after robots, or they're going after AGVs or things like that, and all of a sudden they realize that they've got 3 different vendors of AGVs and 3 different silos of data, another one, and then breaking down the silos is very powerful, and getting data into the data lakes such that you can analyze it and better understand what's going on is powerful. And so you certainly have to be careful as you're bringing in new systems that you're not creating new silos, or that you have a strategy for pulling the data out of them. And I think I will say that that's probably something that people have learned over the last 10 years is when I buy that piece of equipment or when I buy that system, I don't just ask, how do I use this system or equipment? I ask also, how do I extract data from it? because that can be really powerful when combined with other data sets.
Yep. It's not just putting a sensor on.
Exactly. Vibration sensor
Yeah.
fixes every motor out there.
Awesome. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the things that we sort of prepped with. I do want to make sure we save some time to take questions from the audience. So this is your cue to be thinking and to raise your hand for the microphone if you want. But I'd like to, I'm not going to say close because I don't know if we're closing. It depends on how many questions we have. But I guess I'd like to ask at this point, if you could go back to yourselves the first year, how many people this is your first steps calling? Okay. How many second? How many third? That's actually pretty cool. Hey, actually, round of applause for everyone who's been here 3 years. That's kind of cool. All right. Just making sure you're still awake. Cool, cool. Waking you up before you ask for that microphone. But if you could go back to, 3 years ago, if you could go back to yourself a few years ago, what are the 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give to you and your teams? You've given us a lot of practical tips, which was what my objective of this session was, but I want to make sure that we have a chance to hear all of the insights that you both have.
I've alluded to some, I guess, right? Getting involved with IT and quality in a collaborative way early and creating that governance, both the way we do it, we have that governance at the executive level, and then at each site, we mimic that same model, right? And use that to govern how we deploy at the site, subject to broad governance rules that we do network-wide. Thinking about that from Jump Street would have been helpful. What else would I say? I 100% agree with the criticality of thinking carefully about a data curation scheme. At the same time, I would say, my team gets tired of my saying this, right? But I don't need the Mona Lisa at first blush. Like a crayon drawing would be great to start, and then we can make it a pencil drawing, and then we can color it in a little bit, and then eventually I should see the Mona Lisa. That would be great, guys. But don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Because in general, we found that trying to create schemes like that, where generally, as you noted, things are always changing. We make mistakes. We make bad assumptions about where processes are going to go or where products are going to go, or most commonly, the difference between what the documentation tells us the process is and what the operators are actually doing, right?
The hidden factory?
Right, yeah. So a little bit of grace, I think, in thinking about how to design these things and accepting that you're not going to be perfect and a crayon drawing for Rev 1 is fine, I think is something that we should have learned early on. I think we aimed for that too early. And then finally, the most obvious, we're engineers. We love to start with cool solutions, the Tulip solutions, the Highlight solutions, all the other vendors you see here. I love coming here. It's a candy store. But you have to start with problems, right? Our customers are the ones who actually can tell us how to be useful, and it took us a little bit of time to figure that out.
There's so much there that I could double click on. One, I know. One, how did you prioritize, and when did you see the light that you needed? This layer of data contextualization, and who championed that and saw that through, or instigated that?
There are probably 2 layers of answer to that. We continue to have a good relationship with IT and understand kind of where IT is going from an enterprise level for data standards and data lake, data storage, all of that great stuff. And so I think we had an ideal, that's that whole perfect being the enemy of the good part, right, from the get-go, right? And I think, we've had, I'm astonishingly fortunate, right? I have a team that is full of people who will push on a rope till forever, right? They have an ideal in their mind, and they will just try to keep making things and building to get closer and closer to that and be more and more useful. So we've had that from the beginning. I'd say when you think about prioritization, we had to very quickly become more pragmatic, right? So you start with an ideal and you think, oh, we're going to build all this connectivity and we're going to grab data from here and it's going to look beautiful, right? But when you actually start talking to a value stream leader or a site leader, they have very tactical goals that their bonus depends on, right? And you're much better off solving their instant problems. Well, you're much better off actually, and this is going to sound a little butt kissing, but sorry. You're much better off when you have something like Tulip, where we can say, fine, we will go and solve this problem for you, but we know that we can stick a couple of other Lego blocks on this. So, we have our evil master plan, but in the moment, we will solve the targeted problem that you want. And prioritizing specifically against the tactical problems our customers wanted allowed us to get the foothold to begin to solve the strategic problems that our business units and our company overall need.
Gotcha. Good advice. John, anything you want to add before we take questions?
I would just say that we're here at Tulip, and there's a lot of focus on Tulip, but recognizing that there's actually a very broad ecosystem of technology in all of your companies. There are many different applications and uses of data, and data can be extremely powerful, but thinking about your data strategy and putting that together into merging that with your application strategy, or seeing the data strategy as kind of overarching your application strategy, and applications solve problems for people, then it's how I think in this new world, and especially, I'm going to go there, especially with AI, it becomes even more important. It's 6:21 left, so we made it past 20 minutes without saying AI.
That was an unstated goal.
But it's going to bring on the need for understanding your data very well, and the need for distributing and curating and contextualizing and working with data and having a clear data strategy in order to start implementing a lot of these new technologies moving forward. So. Yeah. I think it's been great because Tulip recognizes that it's not just about them, it's about this ecosystem, and you can find a lot of the vendors over there to talk to.
Okay.
So I would just recommend people come and talk to them.
Awesome. I know I could ask some more questions, but I really want to make sure we have a chance to take any from the audience. So we got a couple in the back.
There's a hand in the back.
Thank you.
Hi, could you please share some insights or strategies around ensuring data integrity for GxP data that's being now stored in Tulip tables, et cetera?
Not good, well, no. Really, really good validation schemes, right? An awful lot of practical testing, both so we've set up dev environments and QA environments and do a lot of throwing rocks at the stuff we build, trying to make sure that we understand where the data is coming from and what happens when we break things down. Particularly our EDHR pilot, we had to spend a lot of time thinking about emergency situations, right, to be able to address that problem. But as I said, I think we're only kind of just getting started with this. I continue to wait for the big, oh my gosh, that will actually show us something that we forgot about. And in the interim, we really, in addition to our own thoughts and the thoughts of our colleagues in IT, we really put a lot of trust in this broad community that's been put together for different ideas for how to build, not just from our colleagues in industry, but from the vendors, as was mentioned, right? Every time I come here, I have questions or complaints about the state of our life, and I get something useful from the community on, hey, this is how we dealt with that. And I think it's perfectly okay to recognize that this is still evolving, right? Particularly in our industry.
Any other questions? Got two in the front, Jen.
So coming from somebody who's kind of on a one-legged stool right now, do you guys have any tips? Are there any secret phrases you can try to get to have some other folks more comfortable trying to work with you?
Phrases?
I mean, the classic save friends and enter kind of thing.
Oh,
Right.
in Elvish? Let me see. I mean, it's actually scary because I think my team would tell you that I'm full of platitudes, but I can't think of any exciting ones at the moment. I think the data information action pathway is one that you need to keep in front of you all the time, right? All the time. It is thoroughly useless to. We have had. Boy, I've seen all sorts of really beautiful dashboards. I mean, gorgeous, like colors and stuff and data all over the place, and it's very exciting. And we create them for one of our customers and say, hey, you have all this data now, and they'd be like, that's great. And in fact, we've seen them kind of take it and spin off all of these wonderful Power BI dashboards and all that. And then we'll be like, wow, how much money did you save last year? Because we have to like write that down as a goal. And they're like, what? Right? So, yeah, I think that, and that isn't their fault. Right, that's ours because we started with, wow, wouldn't it be cool? Let's build the infrastructure, let's build the apps, and not how are we actually solving a useful problem for our customers and for our shareholders, right? So I'll come back to data, information, action all the time. The Mona Lisa story is kind of nice too, but
Hello. My question is in terms of engaging or preparing for conversations with regulatory bodies, right? So any thoughts or experiences that you can share in terms of, after you had your data, you validated, X, Y, and Z, what that experience is like with the regulatory bodies?
aside from the fact that I defer to my colleagues in quality on this all the time because they have to live it and usually have to live it in real time, and it gets sweaty when that happens. I've been in med device for a very long time. Most of that in R&D, so deal with it on that side, right? I find that it is always wise to talk to regulatory bodies in the language of risk, right? And then even as technology evolves, as long as you're speaking the language of risk and how you cover risk, how you mitigate against particular things, that language transcends the technology. Right, and then you can explain the technology if you need to. Though actually, FDA is getting a lot better, I think, with regard to machine learning and AI stuff, right? But you can explain how you're using the technology to either offset risk or how you have other procedures, policies, whatever in place to offset risk. But from my perspective, and it's definitely, I would throw that back at the quality folks and say, how would you deal with it? But I always think in the language of risk for that.
Anything else? No? Okay. Awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have left. 10 seconds we could count down, but I think it's a little strange, so we won't. We'll save that for New Year's. But I want to say a personal thank you to you both for prepping for this, for joining me up here, for sharing your experiences with the community. And I want to say thanks to you all for joining us. So here we go.
Thank you.
Okay.